There's a full moon, like a blood moon that's quite rare. It only happens every so many years. So we're going over to the southeast corner of Oregon, where supposedly, according to the National Geographic, there's less light pollution there than any other place in North America. So we're going to go check it out. We get all of our stuff loaded and head out, watching the vineyards, which are nearly ready for harvest as we move along towards Santiam Pass. Another crop that's going hog wild in the Willamette Valley are the hazelnuts or filberts. There have always been some here, but not the amount there is today. They changed the name from filbert to hazelnut, and everyone wanted to get in on the game of growing filberts. From there, we start climbing up the Santiam Pass. We're going through a forest corridor, and we steadily move upward with the giant fir on each side of the highway. Steadily, our V6 motor pushes us eastward. In about 400 miles, we look off, and there's a sight that's kind of rare to see, but all too common out here. It's a herd of the wild horses. And what nice horses! They're in good shape. There's even a strawberry roan with them. So there's a really super nice herd of horses. These horses are wild and free. The old stallion will always stay between you and his valuable mares that he's got many a battle scar from fighting to keep those mares. The sun is setting low in the sky as we look out our rearview mirror toward the west as the sky is glowing, and we can't wait till that moon comes up tonight, and that'll be happening pretty soon, and it's supposed to be a special, rare blood moon that can only be seen occasionally. By now, the Steens Mountains are only a silhouette in the background as we move into the desert, and we're almost to where we're going to spend about the next week at our daughter's 160 acres out in a sea of sagebrush. The sky glows in beautiful colors behind the Steens Mountains. Then we look back to the east, and here comes that rare blood moon over the horizon of the Crooked Creek Range, and it is a doozy tonight. It's nice and clear out here. According to National Geographic, there's less light pollution out here than any other place in the entire North American continent. The property where we'll be staying is 7.5 miles off the nearest road and about 10 miles from the nearest neighbor. So we have peace and quiet out there like you could never believe. It's one place in the world where you can go and never hear the roar of an engine except for airplanes which go over occasionally. As we drive down the little two-track road, This was at one time an old military road for Indian fighting, so it has a very old easement, which is really good out there this day and age. No one can shut off our access. Although the road isn't exactly a freeway, it at least is good enough.
We have arrived at the trailer.
Okay.
By the time we arrive at the little camp trailer that we've built a fence around and have it setting out here to use whenever we want, the moon is rising higher and higher in the desert sky to the east. We pull up and unload the essentials we'll need for the night, and then it's time to get to bed. The next morning, we decide to go on an adventure and see what we can see around. So we'll open the little gate and close it again because there's some pesky little calves in the area that might get in and trample things up. We go back out the little 2-track road for the 7.5 miles till we come to White Horse Ranch Road. Last night there were jackrabbits scampering all over the place, hopping across the road at various different places, but it looks like this morning they've got themselves put away. But we did hear a lot of good coyotes howling this morning, and they probably spent the night chasing those jackrabbits. That sounds like a good sport. After rattling down the 7.5 miles of this not so good road, we finally look ahead and there's relief ahead. The White Horse Ranch Road is ahead of us, and it isn't paved, but it's a very nice road. And then we'll turn on to White Horse Ranch Road and continue on. And the first sign of human inhabitants we see on the way through is the giant White Horse Ranch, which is a very old working cattle ranch. I've heard they run their cattle over 1.5 million acres, and they have 2,500 head of cattle.
Camp C.F. Smith, begun May 1866 to protect Oregon Central Military Road, abandoned November 9, 1869. Then ranched by John S. Devine, became part of Miller and Lux Cattle Empire.
From the White Horse Ranch, we eat only a very few miles of dust till we come to a well-traveled road off to our left. We'll take this road, and for only about 2 miles, we'll come to a hot springs, which is second to none. Today happened to be one of those rare occasions when there were a lot of people there. Usually it's not very many people use it, but today it was so crowded we couldn't get in. So we decided to come back out our little 2-track road and go out and check out Coyote Lake. It's a very interesting place. The specks you see ahead of us are exploded bombs and fins from them, because this was used for bombing practice during the heat of World War II. They mainly used the B-24s, and there's a base nearby where they were stationed. We see some of the formations of sort of a sandstone where the water has eroded them away like miniature mountains. After a quick visit to Coyote Lake, we return back to our trailer house and we see our windsocks flying pretty good. So that darn wind seems to be picking up every day. But we've got some little antelope ground squirrels. They're a very nice little ground squirrel. They're solitary, so you only see one at a time. Although there are a few of them come in here. They've heard there might be a peanut here on the little carpet out in front of the trailer house. And so how could they pass that up? Those peanuts are pretty good. These little squirrels carry their tail right up over their back, and there's one of them that carries his tail sort of off to the side. So we call him Kinky, and he sure loves peanuts. They will hastily pack the peanuts off, and some of them have learned that if they sit down and shuck the shell off the peanut, that they can carry more of them back to their hole, because some of them travel a long distance from their den to come over and partake of peanuts. And if they can carry more than one peanut, why not take the time to shuck it? And other times they take no time to do anything with it. They'll just dig a little hole and bury the peanut and then go after another and another. And then during the night, the kangaroo rats come out, and even though they've taken these little paws and done and covered the peanut real well, dug a little hole and covered it well, those kangaroo rats can sniff it out, and so they lose their peanuts to the vicious appetite of the kangaroo rats as they hop around in the moonlight. It looks as if the Steens Mountain got a brand new coat of snow last night, but that doesn't seem to bother little Fuzzy. He's sitting here shucking the peanuts out and putting them in his cheek pouches so he can haul more, but he's getting kind of reckless. He'll fall victim to a hawk or a coyote if he doesn't learn to be more careful. They Whenever they move out in the open, they have to do it fast. And if they're going to set and shuck a peanut, they better crawl under a sagebrush or someplace. But anyway, we'll leave the squirrels to figure their own way out, and we're going to hunt for some petrified wood today. We've driven down by Disaster Peak right on the Oregon-Nevada border, and we have a special place where we hunt here, and we have to dig these out of the ground. We think they were petrified someplace else, and then were carried in by the the glaciers. Ah, there's a nice piece of log. And so we're allowed 25 pounds per person. So we get hard at it, and in about 2 hours, we've each dug up our 25-pound limit. And we carry a little scale so we can be accurate on that. And one piece after another, some smaller and some larger, go in our bucket till we each have 25 pounds. And that's the daily limit. It's like 250 pounds for your yearly limit. We're heading back, and an old doe and some fawns and a little buck are standing out in the field at White Horse Ranch.
They're sure hiding. There's a mama and a baby. still. Hold still. He's sure looking though, isn't he?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, back at the place where we're staying, the wind has stopped blowing this morning, but everything's covered in water. It was one of those rare desert rains last night, and it rained, but a good one. But that's good to see. That'll make a lot of nice green grass for the cattle and horses and also the other wild game. The White Horse Ranch has their cattle in by the ranch now. They've taken them off the open range and put them in the hay fields where they've cut hay. And they'll clean the hay fields up, and then they'll probably run most of these cattle out on the low desert around where we're camping. They don't have to feed hay when they're out there. And since that's the lowest part of the desert, there's it, not much snow ever accumulates out there. The White Horse Ranch has cattle all over the place, and it's a very old ranch. It's very interesting. A lot of very ornate old stone buildings and everything around the ranch.
They're just like fleas out there. Boy, where did the White Horse Ranch get so many cows?
I don't know, there's sure a bunch of them. But nothing like what people.
But this morning it's our turn to use the White Horse Hot Springs or Willow Creek Hot Springs. It's a spring that just comes percolating right out of the ground with water temperatures from 101 to about 104 on a sunny day. And so it's just a perfect one. While Marge is getting ready to go in the hot springs, I climb up on the hill behind and take a look at Willow Creek. Willow Creek now is just a series of beaver ponds, and the parking area down there is where you park for the hot springs. And these beaver ponds have a lot of beaver in them, and ducks and geese and other animals that love the water. We used the hot springs for quite a little while, and it was super good. Then we decided to go look and see what the old pioneers lived in out beyond near the banks of Willow Creek out in the desert. So we go to the first of the old pioneer houses that were built of double wall stone with mud for mortar and then mud in between the two walls. There are two houses right in this area close to each other, and they were built by two brothers who were bachelors. But that was a pretty good sized house and a pretty fancy one for bachelors. It was heated, and you did your cooking and everything in this fireplace. And these double wall stone were quite warm in the winter and cool in the summer.
And they could set their spices and kettles and different cooking items up here, spoons and all sorts of things they'd need. You can see the tool marks on some of these rock where they've chipped them to make them fit. And the windows are all facing where the good view is. This place is made with double wall stone, and then they used mud for mortar. And that really stood up pretty good till the roof was gone, and now it's starting to dissolve some. There's currents in this building since the roof's gone. The next homestead house is within easy walking distance of this one. They went to a lot of extra trouble building a nice pretty curved fireplace. And the walls are nice and straight even to this day.
The Willow Creek ruins. These ruins are the remains of a homestead that dates back to the last century. Jasper B. Duncan, a bachelor of Willow Creek, and his brother constructed the buildings sometime in the very late 1800s. In 1890, they sold the property to Henry Miller, owner of the White Horse Ranch, and a major force in Southern Oregon history. The White Horse Ranch, located about 7 miles north, is still a working cattle ranch.
The roof was constructed of just laying some sticks, whatever they could find, over the top, with actually a center pole going down it. And then after you get these sticks, which served as rafters up, then you'd pile brush on it, and on top of that brush they'd put dirt and sod, to quite a bit of it on there, and then that made a fairly waterproof roof, and it would be really warm in there with that sod on the roof and the double wall construction. So they were not a second class house. These were built very well, and they must have been some darn good stonemasons because they did a really good job. Again, we see some sawed lumber in the fireplace. There must have been a mill nearby. And then on top of it, they'd lay boards again to put their cooking stuff and everything on it. They strictly did everything in the fireplace as far as cooking. And if you look at these stones, you can see the old original tool marks where these tough old men chipped the rocks. I'll bet they had plenty of calluses on their hands when they got done building one of these cabins.
The depression right here, I'm not sure what it is. There's a possibility that it may have been their old outhouse here at one time. It was surely around here someplace. And then just beyond it is their old root cellar, where they kept their things they grew, like potatoes and onions and carrots, and also if they canned some things, they would have been kept in there. And so it would have been slightly higher than this and had an insulating dirt roof over it.
From the Duncan homesteads, we go on to an old primitive, much older one, and it seems to be built in an area where they needed restricted access. So they may have built this out here when there were still Indian wars going on out here. And so you have Willow Creek on the east side, and then on the west side there's this steep cut where you'd have restricted access, and you couldn't just go galloping up with a horse. And it would have been much easier to defend. the walls are quite straight on it yet, and it was really done quite well. And out front, there's an old fire ring with, it looks like, 100-year-old sagebrush growing right in the center of the fire ring, right outside the front door. So apparently they never had stoves or fireplaces in this homestead house, and there apparently were no sawmills there. Even the door bucks and window bucks were hand-hewed native logs, so it that sort of dates it. And the doors aren't very tall, and the ceiling, if it had had the roof on it, you'd have bumped your head on it. So they surely were smaller people, as people have increased in size in the last 100 or so years. There's one of the hand-hewed beams that go above the door, and we look at the windows, and the windows are all slanted. The the rocks along the side are slanted. So if that would be kind of the way you'd build a fort. So if you were going to shoot out of it, you'd have more range to swing your rifle, and it would have been a more easy spot to have defended. We see the old bottom door bucks still laying there, although they're doing nothing now, but they were hand hewed.
This old stick here was probably one of their rafters for holding the dirt roof on top of it. And of course this is caved in some, I'm sure, but apparently they weren't very tall people at all, because if the roof were on here, I'd be hitting my head on it. And it looks as if it just had a dirt floor forever. This is the height of the door. My head just hits the top of the door buck, so apparently they were shorter people. And I don't know a thing about them. There's some old cans here that could have very well been brought in after they lived here. Hunters and different people might have camped in it. Just beyond the cabin is Willow Creek with its steep mud banks, which would have made restricted access to it, and it's just a little ways from the cabin. The lower window buck was again hand hewed out of probably the native material that grew here along the creek.
As we continue on, we see a pumice wall with a cave in it, and we think this cave was carved by man. I think that would have been, that stuff's easy to dig, and probably they made it for, maybe it was for their root cellar, or maybe they used it for a spare bedroom or some kind of storage. And then we see an old chimney here. It's a corner chimney, and we think this was a sod house that some old homesteader built right here on the edge of Willow Creek. It it's really close to the creek, where you could run down and grab all the water you needed. Your water to wash clothes, uh, to drink and cook with, and do your dishes is all right here in Willow Creek. And probably for a bath, you just grit your teeth and jump in Willow Creek, and you'd come out of there either froze to death or clean. I don't know which. The Willow Creek is dammed up by the beavers. It's almost steady beaver ponds, just one starts where the other ends, and we can see the chimney and then the carved cave up above.
To use for whatever they needed it for, a root cellar or an extra bedroom or whatever. They made a nice one up there.
A flicka hangs on an old native juniper fence post right across from the homestead, and he's looking all around, and he's probably going to get him a bug for dinner. Well, we've seen the homesteads, and now it's time for us to get back to the trailer house and cook us something to eat. Last but not least, we have one more old stone ruins to look at before we go back. And this is probably, even though it's last, it's probably most important. This was an old Pony Express station right on the edge of Willow Creek. The afternoon desert breeze is starting to build a little when we get back, so we go to bed, and the next morning we're awakened by the sunrise over the eastern skies, over the Crooked Creek Range, and we see a bunch of cattle have moved.
Big herd of cattle have moved up next to our fence. I've put on my hat so they'll know I mean business.
Some of the Mustangs have moved in to take a look at us. This is probably two stallions that weren't tough enough to fight for a harem of mares, and so they're off by themselves just beyond the big herd. The big herd out here, some say, is about 100 head of these Mustangs. I'm not sure, but what that might be a slight exaggeration, but I have counted over 60 of them out wandering around the desert, totally free. Since there's a hot springs nearby, there's one in either direction about 20 miles from where our camp is. We're going to go test the water and see how it is this morning. We're both anxious to get in that nice warm water with a wonderful view of the desert. We'll negotiate the 7.5 miles of rutty road till we get out to the main White Horse Ranch Road, and then we'll take a right and go down to Willow Creek Hot Springs this time. It sounds like a really good bet to go there this morning. It looks like it's going to be a little nicer day, although there's still some clouds hanging over the horizon as we get almost to White Horse Road, and we can finally see it ahead of us. White Horse Ranch Road, we take a right on it, and in just a little while we'll be to a very, very nice hot springs. We arrive at the hot springs to find the hot springs is just an absolute perfect temperature, and the steam from it has collected on a spider web, and Mr. Spider, he's still sitting there waiting for his first insect of the morning amongst the droplets of dew on his little spider web. He's taken a lot of trouble to build it, and then he's going to sit here and just wait till finally a little gnat or something will catch himself in there, and he'll have a really nice dinner in a little bit. A gentle breeze is moving the cobweb around a little bit, but still plenty of moisture on it. The steam from the hot springs collects on it. It looks like he'd want to make it someplace else. That'd make it more visible for insects. But he likes it here, and he's definitely determined to make it work, whatever it takes. He's going to hang in there until it finally will work for him. We warmed up in the hot springs, and then after the hot springs, I walked down to the beaver pond to see what's around. Since it's getting later in the day, we spend quite a bit of time in the hot springs. The only thing I see is a coot or two paddling around. If it were early morning, we have to finish this thing we've started. So now we're going out and take a look at the old road where the military road where the Pony Express riders rode. And a wiry little guy would come galloping by here with his mail bags. After the Pony Express got done using the road, it was used as a wagon road, and the mail wagon clattered along here with a cannon in the back for Indian trouble, and they headed for Silver City, Idaho to deliver mail. Twin buttes are standing tall in the background as we carefully make our way down the road. We get to the trailer house and see we had company while we were gone. It's the resident jackrabbit who lives there, and we see him almost every day. Our solar panels are laying out there, but doing good in the filtered sunshine. Seems like they work super well. A little bird sets the next morning on one of the corner posts, just waiting for that sunshine to warm him up a little. But now it's time for us to lay our petrified wood out on the table, and half of it is mine and half of it is Marge's. There's 20 pounds for each of it. I hold up one of the very nice pieces. You can see the growth rings in it very well. And this is super hard, super good material. Some say it's like the best material in the entire world. And there's a few different species of trees represented. There's pine and some hardwoods like oak and other trees that we haven't been able to identify. Anyway, that stuff makes really good jewelry, and it makes really good specimens, particularly in the larger pieces, to decorate around your home.
The Steens Mountains are covered in a thick layer of clouds this morning. As soon as they burn off, we'll see what kind of snow it reveals on top of them.
Suddenly, there's not a ground squirrel in sight, and I think I see the reason. Sitting on the fence post, he's waiting. He would sure like just to have a small ground squirrel. That would be really good. The next morning, we're welcomed by a really pretty sunrise, but we have to start heading home. Marge has to get home. She's got an appointment to fight round one of her breast cancer. And so she needs to get home and get that taken care of so she can get it dealt with, and we'll be back out here again. The old stallion stands at attention as a pure white mare grazes on the sagebrush bunch grass. some really pretty nice horses, and they have long tails and mane that have probably never been combed. And the white